Okay, this is your value scale. This should be a completed value scale. You've worked all the way down to 12 values. And now the sheet that I've given you is the layout for the 4 shapes. Now you can see where this is the number 4 value, the number 8, the number 10 goes here, the number 12 goes here. Same with on the sphere, the same with on the cylinder, and the same with on the cone. These 4 shapes represent all the shapes that you find out in nature. It may be your head is spherical, it may be your arm or your leg is cylinder shaped, it may be that your arm or your leg is bigger at the top and smaller at the bottom, could be cone shaped. There may be a tree. Boxes usually represent things that are man-made. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a plain piece of paper and place on top You're going to place it on top, and you should be able to see through so that you can trace very lightly the outline of the shapes, and you want to draw these lines really lightly so that they can be gone over and get incorporated into the values that you have on your value scale. Get incorporated into the colors on the value scale. Now on these drawings, I don't know if this camera picks up the fact that I'm just copying what was on that one sheet that I gave you. And we're going to always have our light source right here in the center of the paper, the little happy sun. There's our light source. That's why the shadows are always going away. You go from the halfway point away from the object. That's why it doesn't matter that that's going to be a number 12 value, number 12, a number 12, and a number 12. That's the darkest your pencil will make. Now you're going to hold your pencil on its side like this, and you're going to start putting in the value. If you put in the value light enough, let's say that those lines that were drawn at the number 8 value. Well, now you can see that those lines have almost disappeared into the color that is the top of the box. And the light is shining on the top of the box. It's like the light is shining on top of the sphere, on top of the cylinder, on all of this half of the cone. The light is shining on those halves. The ball is divided up like this. The cylinder is divided up in half like this, and from its lowest point of this curve, that's where the shadow starts and takes off from. Alright, so back. Now we're going to try to incorporate these colors, because this is supposed to be the number 8 value. We're going to try to incorporate those colors for the side of the box. Now I'm applying more pressure, and I'm seeing that it looks too much like the other colors, so I'm going to add a little bit more pressure. And I'm really working just in the center. I'm going to turn my paper, so I'm going to use my pencil stroke, doing the same amount of pressure and going to the edge of the line. Now those lines have disappeared, and the line of the illusion of the line has been created where this color touches this color. In good value drawing, where this color touches this color creates the illusion of a line. You don't need a line anymore. We're not doing line drawings, we're doing value drawings. Now this is supposed to be the 10, so it's going to be a little bit darker. So I'm going to have to press a little harder to get it darker than this side over here. And again, I'm changing the direction of the paper and my pencil stroke so that I can get this area here darker by adding more pressure, and also changing the direction of the pencil stroke is covering up more of that white of the paper. Now I think anybody would see that looked at this would see 4 different shades, or right now 3 different shades of color. And I went out of line a little bit right here, so I'm going to get in there and erase that. I'm going to come in and sharpen up this edge so that you can definitely see that this is a different color than this. Alright, there's our 4 colors. The sun is shining on the top of the box. There's our happy sun. It's not getting as much sun on the side of the box, and this is the furthest away, and it's in the shadow. So now when I hold my pencil with my point like you're writing, so I can apply a lot of pressure, and I'm going to make this as dark as I possibly can. So I'm going to have 4 values or 4 colors in this. Now because the box has got straight sides, there's no light wrapping around, and we're not talking about light being a reflection yet. That's a more advanced drawing technique that we'll do later. But there are my 4 colors for my box. Now the next simplest one to do, I think, is the cylinder, and we don't need this sheet anymore. We'll get rid of that. Because what you have to do is the cylinder, the color starts right here, and I'm going to draw it in like there's bands of color. And in the handout, it's 10, 8, 6, and then some 4, and then some 2, and some 2 up on top. So if I start here with my pencil stroke, and even if that pencil line there is too dark, I can always come back in. Now this pencil stroke, as soon as I get to the 6 area, I'm going to press a little harder. It's kind of like what we did when we were doing the value scale. I'm going to press a little harder when I get to the 6 area, the 6. I'm going to press a little harder when I get to the 8 area. This area's got to be darker. This area's got to be darker still, because this is the 10 area. Now what we have to worry about is we've got to finish those colors all the way up to that line. So if you keep rubbing with your pencil point and applying a little bit of pressure, you'll see that those colors change. And you can fill that color in all the way up to that top line. We need to make that line. You can see how the line kind of disappears over here. Need a better eraser. Alright, and because the shadow is down here, we're going to put the shadow in. And that shadow is as black, as hard as you can press down on the pencil to make it really, really black shadow. And this is going to give you contrast. But what I really want to talk about is transition tones. Now, if you see a stripe, like there's definitely a stripe, and there's definitely a stripe. So I need to work in this area, and I need to work in this area, and I need to work in this area because it looks like there's a stripe. So this one I think I would probably take some eraser and lift some of that out, because that area there was too dark. Get back in and put some of that's the number 8 area. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to work in this area right along where that line is, where it looked like a stripe, basically. What we're talking about, it looked like a stripe. And we don't want stripes. We want a gradual change from light to dark. So I'm going to work in this area, and then what I'm doing is I'm pressing down with the pencil. And if I see the color changing, then I stop pressing. So I don't want to press so much that the color that I change the color, and I'm going to go all the way across. Now you can see the 2. You shouldn't see that, so I'm going to get in there and erase that. I should have probably done that before I started. You see, I shouldn't have any lines visible, so I'm going to take my eraser and come along the bottom there and get rid of those lines. And come along the top there and get rid of those lines. And I'm going to lighten that up, and I'm going to erase that number 2 that I have there. Now we want to be able to see the roof or the top of this. So we're going to put in some very, very light color on top, a 2 value, and we're going to bring it all the way out. Now if it's too dark, we're going to reach in there with the eraser and lift some of it up and sharpen some of it out, shape some of it out, shade with the eraser by moving some of that color around. We want a little bit of color up there, but we don't want a lot of color up there, because the light is shining directly on that. And I think this eraser is a little on the hard side. And we let this color, as the number 2 value, be the color for the top of the cylinder. Alright, so we don't see, there's a little bit right there, and I'm going to come in there and I'm going to move some of that color away with the tip of the eraser. And it's a little too dark on this side, so I'm going to remove some of that color. And this is the fine tuning. It's called the fine tuning of the shape, because you don't want the stripes to show. You don't want stripes, this color to show. You want to see the different levels. And this is definitely a change in direction. The top of the cylinder is definitely a change in direction. All of these colors up here have got to be different than these colors down here. Alright, so we start off doing something really quickly, and then we spend a lot of time trying to make it perfect. And you're going to practice this 4 times before you're going to be tested on it. Now, the cylinder also can be cleaned up. We can, erase around the edge and make the paper white, and that makes that look even sharper. But when we're done, you see very little lines. If you see any line at all, you might see just that little tiny bit of line that's left right there, and I can just blend that into that color. Just like that. And I think I'd want to take and make this a little darker. Now you'll see some videos on YouTube where they put in some reflected light. So the light's coming down, it's casting a shadow on this, it's bouncing off of this and bouncing back up on the. But again, that's a more advanced technique, so we're just going to start off keeping it simple, and we're going to pull out all the bells and whistles when we start doing all the little magician tricks of illusionary, drawing things that look round on a flat surface. Okay, now I worked that dark black color that I put in, and blended it in so that we don't have a stripe there. Now, the problem that people have, I think the cone is so much similar to the cylinder, but people end up not making the shapes wedge-like. Alright, this is divided in half, so all the different shadows are on this half, and this half, just like the top here and the side, is going to be all the same color. So I'm going to get in here before I even start. I'm going to lighten that edge up, because that's where I'm going to stop with my gray color that I say this is a cone, and it's got a gray color on the cone, and this is the shadow or the colors that you see on this gray cone. Alright, so the key is that make this dark, and then make the next one lighter, and make the next one lighter, and make the next one lighter. And again, we want to get rid of these. We want to get rid of these lines. We don't want to see the lines, so I'm going to go in and erase those lines. These ones are up close. They're going to be hard to blend in because they're a little too dark. Alright, so you can see that I'm turning the paper all the way around and it looks upside down to you, but this is a way that I can do my pencil stroke that works for me. And a little darker, a little lighter, a little darker, a little darker, and then a lighter. And these have to go up like slices of pizza, like pie, pizza pie. All the way to the top. Now you can see we definitely have a line right here. So I got to work on the transition color that's in between. I'm going to sharpen this up for a real black edge across the back of that cone. And I'm going to lighten by removing some of this darker color that went out too far. I'm going to remove some of that, and sometimes you have to go back in and remove some of your color because it got too dark, and it needs to be lighter in here. And when I work on this edge, I need to be able to blend those colors in so we don't have such a stark change from light to dark. It needs to be gradual. This area here is too stark. It's too much like a stripe. We want to be able to see all of that color. I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, oh, I just think this has got to blend together a little bit more, so I'm going to erase some of it. And I'm going to try to put some more of it back in. And then every time you do that, your pencil changes a little bit, your eraser, the paper changes a little bit. And all you can do is try to get a gradual change from light to dark. It should be like this is a gradual change from light to dark. You want the same gradual change from light to dark over here. And I think the only way I'm going to get that is if I bring this darker color out a little bit more. I use the eraser to remove some of that pencil lead, and I'm trying to do it in a regular pattern so it looks more natural. And the real key is I'm trying to think about this being divided in half this way. I think once I get my dark shadow in from my shadow, that's going to make that pop out even more. So I'm pressing really hard my number 2 pencil, and that shadow is going to be dark, shiny black. And that's going to create the illusion that that's round, and I can reach in there and pick that up. All right, we saved the best for last. The circle is or the sphere, the ball, is by far the hardest one to do. But if you think about the numbers, this is 2, I'm going to barely lightly see that, then 4, then 6, then 8, then 10. If you think about those numbers, and we start here and do a strip right down through the middle, because the ball is divided in half this way. Okay, so this is a number 2 value, and we're going to bring that back. We may even get in there with the eraser. And now I'm going to press a little harder for 4. The same concept, a little bit harder for 6, a little bit harder for 8, and a little bit harder for 10. Alright, so now I've got to take these colors up and they get smaller as they go around. So I can treat this like a coloring book and try to keep that same amount of pressure on there and start getting these colors in, and then I can worry about blending the stripes in so there's no stripes and covering up the I'm going to keep the same amount of pressure so you're making the same color. This is the color we started off with. So there was 2, 4, this is the numbers, I guess 6. This is the number 6 value. And what's number 6 value? You go back over to your value scale, and 6 is about this color right here. All these colors is about 6. So that's how you know what colors to put in. Now we're back down to the 8, so we're going to be a little bit darker. And it gets a little thinner as it goes up. And do the same thing going up the other direction. Make sure that my pressure is the same. You can see some stripes starting to happen. We're going to go back in and work on those later. And now we're going to work on the number 10 value. We know there's going to be some stripes left over from that. And try to get the same dark color to wrap around the bottom of this sphere. Alright, so now that we've got our base colors in, we need to be able to bring those around and work on the transition zones. Between the 8 and the 10, we need to put some color that would be a 9 right in on the seam between the 8 and the 10. So we need, and that will blend those two colors together. So now this is 8, we need to put some 7 in between the 6. Now I'm applying different amounts. I can go back and forth with no pressure on the pencil at all, and it's not going to make this darker or lighter. It's going to maybe fill in some areas that are white, but it's not going to change the color. But when I press down, it's going to change the color a little bit. So when I'm working in this area, I'm moving the pencil back and forth, and we're trying to move that color around. And get rid of those transition zones or stripes is what we're trying to get rid of. We're trying to get rid of those stripes. Alright, so now I still see some of this little bit of that circle that I put in to show me where the number 2 would go. And I'm seeing a little bit of it down here. So I'm going to get in there and erase that a little bit. And then work on putting some of that color back in. Now the light is shining down, so the top of the ball has got a lot of highlights on it. But if you go in and do a circle like this, then it looks like there's a hole. Looks like there's a hole here. So you got to gently blend those areas in. I'm moving that eraser around, and you'll see that is removing some of the color, but it's also moving some of the color around, and it'll help you to make that all those different colors transition from one to the other. And I kind of like that look. And it kind of looks like a ball of string. So we go back in and put some light color over the top of it with our pencil. And we're going to play around with it till we get it to where it's just right. We go back in with our shadow, and once we make that shadow really dark and the ball is sitting up on top of the shadow, that adds some more detail, some more realism to the sphere, to make the sphere look like it's sticking up a little bit better. You have to add a little bit more around this right down here at the bottom. Alright, and we're going to end up a little bit more highlight in here in the center. We're going to erase that up there. We're going to erase our halfway marks, and we're going to look at that ball and go, hey, that looks pretty much, that looks pretty good. I'm going to erase some of this right here. Little transition, that black color should be out there from underneath. And that helps just sharpen up your image by putting in that dark color right there on the edge. And blend this part in a little bit. You gotta be careful, you don't want to move too much of the pencil lead around, and you end up having to go back in and put it back in. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with those shapes. I could play around with them some more, put in some more highlights, because this top half is really getting a lot of light, but there's some shadowed areas where that ball is curving away from the light source in both directions, and that's why there's still some color up in here. But basically it's divided in half, and the light is coming down in all those directions that are making this whole part light. Alright, so this took 25 minutes. I imagine if I wasn't talking, I could probably have done it faster. And now that you have seen this demonstration, I want you to continue to do that for the remainder of class as much as you can. You need to have 4 pages of practice like this. That'll make you have drawn 4 spheres, 4 cylinders, 4 cones, 4 boxes. You should have 4 pages that look like this when you're done with this part of the project before we move on to the next part of the project.